To bet on Celestia, you need a lot of Solana-sized rollups posting data to it over a very long period of time. So like it could be a legitimate thing, like if the app chain thesis is a thing and things want to post data to Celestia, it ends up being the big winner. Like it could be the fundamental winner like today through the next 15 years, but it's going to take a long time for that valuation, I think, to make a lot of sense.
Nothing said on 0x Research is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and any views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our opinions, not financial advice. Boccaccio, Ryan, and our guests may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. Today I'm joined by Danny, Ryan, and Nikhil to talk about what is happening in the markets and across crypto. Typically, I like to start this off by passing it on to somebody else by saying, what is happening in the markets? What are you guys looking at? Unfortunately, I don't know if that's going to be possible today since it's kind of boring out there. For what it's worth, we spent the past half an hour before this pod talking about stablecoin growth. So I don't know how to begin, but maybe let's start off by saying, how long do we see this boredom last? What are our macro views? If we can't figure out topics for the podcast, let's do macro, I guess. Like nobody else does it.
Oh,
All
I
right.
think that the boredom will last until August is over.
Yeah.
This
Oh, you're
this is
the
just Yeah, this is just seasonality, baby. July's boring, August is boring, then everyone comes back from vacation and things will get interesting again.
I thought Americans weren't supposed to take vacation. Isn't it like a
Yeah,
European thing where it's like until end of September I'm off?
I was going to ask what vacations.
The American stereotypes around American vacationing, I think, are growing. Just like from a past life, like every like head honcho in a bank goes away for August, and like now you're seeing this like VCs don't work in the summer meme, and the US has more VCs than anywhere else, right? So like it's starting. We're it's bullish vacations in the United States.
Do VCs not work in the summer because they sell in May and go away, or is it the other way? Is it chicken and egg?
I don't know.
More pertinent question might be, do VCs work? Or is it just in crypto especially, or is it just let's just throw some money at it, one of them will work out? I guess less controversially, what is the big news for today? Anything happen?
The one interesting thing we've got today is that Drift on Solana has just announced Bet, their name for their own prediction markets on Solana, and it sounds like, I haven't read this entire announcement, but some interesting things that maybe they'll be offering is that for trades on the platform, you'll earn yield on those bet trades, likely by utilizing the underlying Drift borrow lend engine. So that's I think sort of an interesting distinction. Otherwise, I mean, what are you guys' thoughts? Prediction markets have been a hot topic. Lots of talk around Polymarket. Any thoughts here on Drift kind of going at it themselves?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I'm gonna try and be more positive about Drift going forward. I think this is actually a pretty cool attempt. Like earning on your collateral is interesting. And I think it's just like a natural fit, I would say. I mean, they already have the matching engine, so why not just utilize it for whatever you can? My only, I guess, gripe with this, as well as with all prediction markets in crypto, is that the it's just, I mean, I guess you can say it's about all things in crypto, but it's such a like your competitors are DraftKings, Bet365, like massive companies. So I don't know how well like betting markets / prediction markets can do. I do think it's worth exploring though, and I think this is a pretty decent fit.
Yeah, I think personally, I think the yield component here is interesting by kind of leveraging their existing platform. I've had, anecdotally, have had friends talk about various trades on like Polymarket, for example, and I've kind of been like, well, why would I do that? Like, I'll miss out on yield on this XYZ other thing. For a lot of these trades tend to be multi-month time span things, and you're maybe trying to arb some small percentage. So it's like, if I'm going to miss out on some percent that I can just get, as like a relatively risk-free rate, why would I take this trade here? But I think if you can get that via, if you can capture the yield and take the trade at the same time, that's pretty interesting. It's like a nice double dip, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I wonder what the yield is, though. I feel like it'd be like 3% or something, which I don't take smart contract risk for 3%. I'd rather just bet it on a token and lose it all, if that's what we're doing.
To your point, Bach, while he's doing that, lending USDC on Drift right now, deposit APR is 8.5%.
That's not bad. 8.5%.
Yeah, it's not the worst. They also, it looks like, have some PYUSD rewards, and that is earning 20%. So if they let you make trades in PYUSD, you could earn a significant yield on that while betting on your election trades.
Hey guys, Permissionless, the event for crypto natives, is heading west to Salt Lake City, and we're bringing the biggest names in crypto together for an incredible can't-miss event. Join me and the rest of Blockworks on October 9th to hear from more than 200 industry titans, including Nick White from Celestia, Shriram from Eigenlayer, and Keone from Monad. The conversations at Permissionless will be covering the hottest themes in crypto, including modularity, restaking, the Bitcoin and Solana ecosystems, AI and crypto, rollups, L2s, institutional adoption, and of course the November election that will be right around the corner. We couldn't be more excited about this event, and it's happening in one of the most beautiful places in the US. Ticket prices will be increasing towards the end of June, so get your ticket today. Make sure to use the code so I get some credit and bragging rights from the rest of the team. Use 0x10 for 10% off on your ticket. One more thing. We're also hosting the Permissionless 3 Hackathon in collaboration with BiddleBox. The theme this year is a multi-chain future, to build a better cross-chain experience so I don't have to have a heart attack every time I bridge to a new chain. All hackathon participants will receive a free ticket to attend Permissionless. So if you're a developer, come join us in Salt Lake City, team up with fellow devs, and build the multi-chain future.
Speaking of, I guess, Farcaster then, Bach, do you use it? I'm curious, if you have thoughts there.
Yeah, I used to use it. I think it got really bad. I had quite a bit of fun actually. There was this channel called Reply Guys. I don't know if you guys were in it or if you saw it. Not to flex, but I was one of the first 500 members in there. Just in case that would add to my cloud or something. But I used it for some time, and then degen tipping, I think, was like a double-edged sword for that because it onboarded a lot of people. I mean, free money is free money. More money is more good. People come on the platform. But it also brings on like the worst crowd, I think. It's like pure engagement farming, or it's like just spam. It's either stuff like, oh, this kid lost his elbow in X. Let's tip for donations, or it's like, please sir, can you give me 1000 degen? It's like, I don't want to see that on, like, the channel system makes sense because you can make it like locked, but back then you couldn't, so I never got the benefit. I think now you can make it locked. Either way, it's just, it devolved into chaos, and after that you never want to go back. I mean, not that Twitter is any different. It's just like, if I'm going to go onto a new platform, it needs to be an improvement. I'm not going to a platform that's used less, where I don't get the same dopamine. Like, there's less likes, there's less recasts or whatever. Why would I use it?
That was my general feeling as well. I think I was using them both for a while, and it had a good experience, but it wasn't, like you're saying, not differentiated enough. Not better is not really the right word, because they're sort of maybe appealing to slightly different things, but just not new and exciting enough over using something like X to make me want to switch entirely or use it more than kind of where a lot of CT exists today.
There was also a lot of people that said that they would exclusively post on Farcaster, all of their different takes and details about protocol upgrades and stuff like that. That lasted maybe a week or two, and then they were back on CT. So I stopped using it at that point because I was like, okay, cool. There's going to be some unique information here that I'd like to be a part of. And then very quickly, it just completely stagnated, at least from my experience.
Yeah, it's a tough sell to build the same thing, but less. the tipping stuff was cool, and I did like frames. I just like I'm sure it'll come back. Like it's one of those things that I am actually pretty sure that it will, like maybe not Farcaster V1, but there'll be like Farcaster V2 or some completely different social platform. I think it's like people obviously like it. There's been a lot of money thrown at it and like in it. Like the platforms were used to transfer money around. People seem to enjoy it, and they like CT is such a great place for that experimentation because we're all very risk on, and we're like you can just chuck money at something if you just use it. So I think people enjoyed it. I think it'll come back, but they need to implement those fixes or else it won't work.
Yeah, I think the tipping portion, like it does feel like it had a bit of like its own kind of friend tech moment where there's like that quick like up and down of like people see the potential like revenue opportunity for themselves or what have you. And they flood in and then they flood back out as soon as that gets diluted or is not, maybe realize it wasn't as great as they thought. But I think to your point as well, like into the future, stuff like frames, things like blinks now on Solana as well, like someone will find more interesting ways to like kind of integrate socials. I think there's this hard like kind of cult like challenge of if you're going to do something like a Farcaster and try to just like get people to move over, you're going to be competing with these massive giants in social media. And so, maybe there will be more interesting ideas in terms of like having like a kind of like a layer that connects existing, like, if it's X or if it's Twitter or if it's Facebook Messenger, whatever. If you can overlay that activity using something like frames or blinks to kind of like have this kind of like disconnected layer where people can interact. I don't know if that would actually resolve that problem because you still have to go and interact there, but it's that tech is a step in the direction, I think.
Yeah. Like all Farcaster had to do was be Twitter before it was Twitter, like before what it became now. And that no like feed that's feeding me constant rage bait or random stuff. Like if it was just a simple feed of crypto, because I only go on Twitter for crypto anyway. I don't care about anything else on Twitter. So it just had to be that. I mean, I guess it's not like the Gorillion TAM that they want, but it would be a viable product that I would genuinely use every day. But they put that channel thing in, and then channels were open to everybody. It was tough to token gate it and NFT gate it, or like in general lock it. That made it really difficult, but it's a step in the right direction. We've done more experimentational stuff. The time thing, like buying somebody's time on they had like 3 iterations of it. They have another one now. Those things are also cool. Objectively, the coolest thing that has come out is Frentech because it uses actual like crypto dynamics. I mean, you can say what you want about like Racer and what happened to Frentech, but that was the only I would say Farcaster. It's cool, but it's more like ETH people circle jerk rather than an actually useful app at this point. No, but it's true. Like Frentech, you went on and you had fun. The fun that I had on Frentech for a month, and then the airdrop fun was quadruple the amount that I had in total on Farcaster. I don't know what it was like for you guys, but
Yeah, no, I definitely feel the same about that. And that was my only concern with Farcaster is that I don't know if it'll be able to capture the same level of attention as Friend Tech just because of the maybe with the like tipping and some of the financial component there, it makes sense. But that was my only main concern. But adjacent to that topic, what are you guys' thoughts on like Lens? I feel like I keep hearing about it, but Farcaster is the main thing that people are using and integrating with, and things I hear about Lens are more like third party projects like I don't know, like Web3 music protocols that are like, hey, we're gonna integrate Lens. Farcaster is like social stuff. And then
yeah.
like Lens is like we'll just put adjacent stuff and just plug it into Lens. Has anyone been hearing about what's going on there?
So both Lens and Farcaster at the protocol level are very similar. They're both decentralized social graphs. So it's like what we're talking about right now is technically Warpcast, which is like the platform that gives you the Twitter like feed and whatnot. Um, but yeah, like I wrote a report on this for Blockworks, but I think the only difference between them is that Lens uses NFT dynamics versus Warpcast doesn't. That's what I can remember, and it's they both like have attachments to your identity or your ID or whatever they call it. Like they call it individual stuff. And then you can view that on whatever platform. So on Lens, you could have a YouTube-like platform, like a video player, and use also like a Twitter type of microblogging platform, and it would have the same identity. So it would just be Nikhil, and you would just carry it over, kind of like Google Suite slash Gmail. Lens, I think, never took off because it had that like moment of airdrop farmers, sibylers, random people coming on and posting, here's how you can make 10,000x on your altcoin. Months before Farcaster did. I think everybody farmed because Farcaster actually did one thing really well, and it was invite only, and you had to personally invite message Dan Romero for some time, and then after that it was like invites.
Yep, Frentech as well. They did the same thing with the invite codes. I agree. I think that's really smart because I totally remember the Lens. Like, I mean, I followed Lens for a while when they were quite early, and it was like it suffered from that problem significantly of like you log in there and all the activity is just like a, you know, farming potential points that maybe do or don't exist for the future of just like GM, hey guys, GM, this coin 1000x, etc. Like there wasn't like real activity on there. It was just this spam of, you know, hoping for something to come.
Yeah.
And maybe the timing played a part as well because
Yeah.
I think Lens was quite a bit earlier, before like we had this kind of sort of wave in the market late last year.
Yeah, and I think social media is obviously like a very tough nut to crack anyway, but it's also very reliant on demographics and who you have posting on the platform. Like at the end of the day, there are people who use Twitter not to post, but only to follow people who post. And if you can't curate that group, which I think Farcaster did really well, I think Dan Romero had a strong network, and he brought on quite a few like both influential and interesting people, as well as like people who just post and people like reading their posts for some reason, like more VC thought leader types, which some people enjoy reading about. So they all went on that platform and people joined it. Versus Lens was, you can't have a points farming program in crypto social because you need to like it's like a baby, you need to nurture it very very carefully, or else it's going to go to the wrong direction and then you can't take it away, you can't bring it back, you can't have something like Lens and then be like, oh, actually guys, we're going to make it cool again. It's not going to work.
I will say, I think like focusing on differentiation, like Frentech is clearly a different product than like X or like existing like feed based social platforms. It was like specifically catered around a sort of a differentiated niche, which I think kind of helped with their like the level of explosive growth that they saw. So like I think if you look in the kind of existing like giants of like live streaming or social media platforms, like it doesn't go over well. You know, we had platforms like Mixer that tried to like just pay a bunch of streamers big contracts to bring them over to their platform to you know like grow their user base, and then that platform shut down within like a year or two. YouTube has done the same thing, trying to like poach streamers over from Twitch over to their like gaming live streaming platform, and I think ultimately like that hasn't really worked. There's things that come down to like just is the platform better, is like the community experience like better, the chatting features, etc. I think ultimately it's going to come down to like just having a better product or like better kind of community oriented thing there when we're talking about a social platform. So just like coming up with like a DeFi, you know, X platform and then trying to bring people over is just not going to be enough unless you really have something that's like uniquely interesting there.
Yeah, I think that's the key part that you said, the unique part, because even seeing like the pipeline for like social media platforms and them taking off, like you've got something like Facebook, for example, then you have like Instagram that's kind of differentiated, Snapchat that's very different as well. And then like they provide a very unique experience to a very specific demographic, and they scale up and milk that as much as possible, and then ironically converge in design across each other. So like, you know, like Instagram, for example, now has a lot of overlapping design with like, let's say Snapchat and a variety of other different like social media platforms. So I think that was my main apprehension with like Farcaster and Lens, is that they have this cool substrate, but they're going after basically just creating a clone or like a slightly altered version of like X/Twitter. That's why I still think like Frentech was very cool, because like you said, it wasn't trying to be, you know, something that was already on the market. It was trying to go after this niche, and there was an opportunity there. So it'll be cool to see if like somebody can pull that off. I think there's still a lot of room for somebody to do something cool.
Yeah. You make a great point about convergence, because I think like the success of TikTok, we've seen like, YouTube shorts, like all the platforms you just mentioned, they all have like their own like short video piece because they see that potential. And so obviously you have the same problem here where it's like, if it's Farcaster, Warpcast, if it's Friendtech, etc., like they might see the potential value in those things and be like, well, we should just do, the same thing. But
Yeah,
like it has to probably start with that
yeah,
kind of unique differentiation first,
yeah,
grow that sticky user base, and then maybe you can like tap into that later on.
yeah. 100%, 100%. You need that like user liquidity basically that seeds content like early on, and then things can kind of pick up. The same thing's true with like gaming as well, with content creation platforms. Like you need that sort of base, and that base comes from some sort of unique offering, and then from there you can start to generalize to attract other audiences that kind of can sit on top of that base that you've kind of created.
Ryan, you're working on a decentralized social media report, no? Or were you looking into it?
I'm kicking the tires. Yeah, I'm kicking the tires. I think that look, I think at the end of the day, all of these networks are like content businesses, and it's really hard for an incumbent to compete on content, especially at this stage of the game where you have these massive, well-capitalized social networks with a lot of ML talent and access to compute and established networks, um, established network effects, whether that's the creator and their audience, or just where a conversation takes place. And you can think of crypto Twitter as exactly that, crypto Twitter. It's not crypto Farcaster yet, and I don't even think it's close. So the question is like, how do you compete? Like, what is the wedge for one of the social networks? Um, I think I think there's like kind of two ways to compete. One is that like the existing social networks have such a they need to mess something up in terms of like data privacy, or like something that Twitter's going through right now where they're just making a lot of people unhappy with I think the lack of content curation. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but I think users and especially advertisers are objectively not happy with that. So like maybe, you capture some of that like user flow as a result of that. I think that the kind of the more obvious one is, and it's what Friendtech kind of, it's exactly what Friendtech did, which is just like on the financial side, just allowing people to be financial on your platform because the existing rails will not do that. It's
Yeah.
actually something where they're unwilling to compete. Like, okay, Twitter might want to set up payments, but they're really slow at it. It's still not out. They've been talking about it for years. Facebook is not going to let you like click a blink and, ape into a prediction market, right? But like maybe Farcaster can. So I think you have to compete on what like the very obvious thing that crypto does, where it's just like let people take risks and send value. Um, and like is Farcaster doing that today? Um, it's I don't know. It's not obvious to me. It's certainly not part of their curation strategy. It's very like decentralized, and it's not obvious to me that that's helping.
I with that curation strategy thing, I completely agree with you. Like in terms of how Farcaster does it, I don't think it's even like a good way to do it because they very much push you into these subreddit style platforms, and I don't think that's a good way. Like at the end of the day, I think most people just want to follow XYZ user and just have their feed that. And I think Twitter messed it up in that sense. It's like even if you do post a blink on Twitter, let's say, there's no guarantee that your followers will even see it. If I posted something for like you, Danny, and Nikhil, you probably wouldn't even see it because you'll be on your For You page. And it's the same with Farcaster. It's like it's on these specific channels, and I'm not sure how conducive that is to reach to people. So I'm not. And there's also like not many people on Farcaster, so I guess that's not really a curation thing, though. That's just they need to up their game up a bit.
Yeah, as I'm thinking about this, I'm confusing myself on the difference between Farcaster and Warpcast. Like I obviously know what they are. I know the strategy, but and like the strategy is clear, right? It's like, okay, if you build up enough of a user base, like it makes sense to give developers the freedom to create a unique experience for that like decentralized social graph. That's super cool. Um, but it's confusing the existing users. Like it's kind of confusing me. Um, and is anyone doing that but Warpcast today? It's yet to be, yeah.
There's a few, but they haven't caught up as much because I think the only times that I used it is when Warpcast was struggling because a lot of people were using it. But obviously, that's not really the case anymore. Like there was a few alternatives, Yum or Yup. It might be Yup. I don't think it's Yum.
Yup was like an aggregator. They aggregate between like Lens, Farcaster, and a couple other like decentralized social stuff. And I think they even aggregate across Twitter too. Yeah, so it might be Yup.
I think the like ideal solution for that would have been just naming it Farcaster, Warpcast Farcaster as well, and just because if you're a dev, you're gonna like I'd rather confuse the devs than the regular user. Just make the devs be like, oh, there's also another Farcaster instead of being like, oh, this is Warpcast, this is Farcaster.
Yeah, I think maybe you're seeing it on Twitter today, like for just further establishing its lead. Like I think that a frames or a blinks like product um, that everyone has enabled in that feed can be super powerful, especially like for the sending the value flow thing. Like maybe this doesn't even happen on a Web3 native thing. And maybe Elon is just like adventurous enough if that thing starts taking off and there's value flow on his platform, which is like what you want, especially if you want to do the super app thing like Elon's hinted a lot
Yeah.
historically. Like maybe crypto becomes that thing. And maybe you want to embrace it as these advertisers are like not coming to the platform like he had hoped.
He implemented subscribing, which I feel like is a very basic level of that. You have to pay to see some people's posts. I don't know. It's taking quite a long time, and it would have just been as simple as like doing like a Venmo or a Cash App. I think those are the like big American ones, right? Or like Revolut is what they have in Europe. Doing like a simple integration with that. I know there's definitely like licensing stuff, and I'm sure there's triple the licensing stuff in the EU, but I mean, surely you could have worked it out over the past 2 years, or at least like a slight attempt at it.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think the value would be there at the very least. Like to Ryan's point and to your point as well, Bach, around subscribing, like, taking a percentage of all kind of value transferred. That's a good business model when you have like millions of users who might, even if they're sending $10, like you're going to capture that across millions a month or whatever. Um, that's nothing to scoff at. And if it's just simple integrations and you're not really like, these are tools and things that have been built out, you just get to integrate them into your platform and then just capture some revenue on that. But like we're saying, like, I think as well, there's like probably some regulatory question marks when it comes to people like sending money back and forth or directly to influencers in some cases for certain things. So, um, but yeah, I do wonder why it maybe hasn't been kind of pushed on, or other like more direct efforts to go after it have not been tackled quite yet.
I wonder if it's just because it's just like he has two very contradictory views. One is like anon culture form of the internet. The other one is let's make it the super app, which requires KYC. It requires like a lot more stringent checks. That you can't have a billion bots per user if you're letting people transfer money to users, because then that's like people already get scammed on Twitter all the time. That's like another recipe for disaster. Um, so I wonder if that's just like another issue that he has is like, how the hell do I actually implement this? We'll see. I'm sure it'll work out.
It's interesting though, as like a counter that he also implemented the revenue sharing
Yeah.
to like creators, like I think close to right after the buyout, I want to say. So that was like a pretty recent feature after the kind of the takeover, the switch to becoming X, I guess you want to say. So I don't know he had a further roadmap there in mind of like going down that financialization path, and it just got lost. But we'll see.
That's another thing that puzzles me, is you're inviting the worst, because especially with the way that he counts engagements, this is just turning into what's wrong with Twitter now, but especially with the way that the engagements are like counted, you're inviting the worst form of engagement, like the lowest form of content. Essentially, you're encouraging people to post rage bait, um like hypersexualized content and like general midwittery in attempts to get X amount of views so that they can get a payday. And and then you force everybody, it's kind of a power move, and then you force everybody else on the platform who maybe doesn't want to engage with this content to watch it at all times on the For You page. So it's like it's kind of a long drawn out form of torture for a regular human being.
Yeah, I think this is a problem that all social platforms struggle with, though, right? Like on YouTube, you get, obviously they have different ad rates and whatnot, depending on the category, what have you. But if you can pump out rage bait or just anything that gets views, cringy clickbait content, recapping stuff that other people have created, like you've done no work other than just like aggregate other maybe sources of news or memes, etc. Like you can earn a dime on that. I won't speak to whether like that's the right or wrong way to go about it, but it certainly like drives a ton of content. Like people see that opportunity and they go after it.
Yeah, all social media has become that now. It's kind of, and that's why Mr. Who said this? I think Sam Altman said this. He was like, just real life experiences will have a huge premium in the future. And I think like most people were like, oh, that's because everything's going to be digitized. I think it's because everybody will try and run away from digitization. Well, I guess the same thing, but at some point, this is going back to, we actually did a podcast. Ryan, was it with you? No, it was with Dan Smith, where we had on two people from Liquid Culture FM, and they were like, oh, everything's going to be digital. I was like, no, we're all going away. We're moving away from social media. Like the internet is going to die out. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be wrong on this one, but we'll see.
Hot take.
Very hot take. It's a wrong take as well. I know it's wrong. I think it's just hope. It's just pure hopium. I will get off the internet. You guys can stay on and watch people get beheaded on Twitter. I
Jesus.
won't do it anymore. No, but that's literally
I
it.
don't know who you
Yeah.
follow.
I stay on Twitter lists. I don't go on my For You page ever, or almost never. I just stay on lists.
All these
There,
EU
there,
guys, man, big doomers.
there is a problem with Twitter for you today. You can see that they've changed the algorithm a few times. I'm getting pretty good at avoiding the rage bait stuff. I see a lot of politics when I don't want to, and you really just have to scroll past it very quickly. Like it knows what you spend time on, knows what you don't, and if you stay on the post too long, like you're giving the thing feedback that you are engaging with this content, so it's going to give you more of that.
Yeah.
You got to swipe quick, really,
Yep.
really quick, even if like it's really good at showing you things like TikTok, right? Like you can accidentally be on TikTok for an hour and feel terrible after, but you spent an hour of your time on it, right? And that's feedback to the system. Um, so yeah, it's a beast. You have to really toy with it. But I mean, Elon is a fantastic hire of engineering talent, and he's really good at engineering systems to have like phenomenal UX. Like if you've ever been in Tesla, you know that. Um, I'm not bearish on um, what he's going to do with that platform, and um, I guess more broadly, Bach, I'm not bearish on the internet.
I'm not bearish on the internet. I'm bearish on this form of the internet. You can't be bearish on the internet because it's all consuming and knows everything you've ever desired or will desire. But you have to at some point say, let's relax a bit. Like, stop
I
showing
think,
me random stuff.
yeah, it just comes down to human restraint. I think a lot of the negativity there is around like people not moderating themselves maybe as much as they should be. To Ryan's point, like I've certainly seen the example where like you see one video on TikTok about like X topic, like anything, like pregnancy, and then for the next week, it's like, okay, every video that comes up, it's all about pregnancy. Like every video you're gonna get, and you're like, how do I get out of the cycle? Everything they show me, like I can't swipe through all of them fast enough.
No, it's definitely about moderation. It's also why I've never downloaded TikTok, and I'm pretty sure if I downloaded it, I would literally die in a week because I can't. Like I'm like, oh, interesting. Let me look at this for an hour. So that's where crypto is at right now, where we talk about social media algorithms for 20 minutes. Let's actually do some, now that we have kind of like a plateau in the markets, maybe we should do narratives that have died out. This is something that we wanted to talk about last week, I remember. We didn't have time. There was a lot to talk about last week, not this week. So I'm going to start off by saying modularity has relatively died out now. Initia's supposed to launch soon, but like Tia, Dimension ran out of steam. Nobody really talks about them anymore. Forever Top was in, maybe not forever, but Forever Top was in when people were running DCF models on airdrops from staking. And I'm not sure how they could ever come back for what it's worth. Like they will probably, but let me show off. The Daniel Smith will be very proud of me for showing this off. We have a incredible, probably the best, not probably, definitely the best dashboard for Celestia in the world. And as we have done it, Celestia has $30,000 in total blob fees. That's cumulative, by the way. That's not. So that's pretty ridiculous. And I wonder how it can ever justify whatever valuation it's at right now. Even if you factor in growth, and I'm sure we will factor in growth, maybe at like a 300x multiple, but I don't know how it ever comes to that. What do we think?
So something I've been thinking about, like related to Celestia, is that I believe they're going to have like some token unlocks going into Q4, and I've been seeing an increasingly number of folks, especially on the liquid token fund side, talking a little bit about Celestia as like an interesting area. I'm not sure if they mean interesting instead from a fundamental perspective, more from like a left curve and like right curve perspective. That okay, token price came so down. Smart people building on it, even though maybe it's never going to justify the valuation, could potentially be something that, if that narrative does come back, it is going to be the main token that basically represents that overall narrative.
Yeah.
And at the current prices that it's at right now, and will probably go a little bit lower after some of the unlocks, that could be something that's interesting. That's my only take there. Otherwise, I agree with everything you said, but that's just my only caveat, that still could be interesting. I still just don't know how they'll ever justify their valuation, but I have a feeling that there could be some cool things that come out maybe going to the start of next year with depressed prices.
Yeah, but then you come to that point where it's like, oh, dog shit is 80% off. Should I buy some right now? And it's like, should you? Um, you know
Yeah,
what I mean, though? It's like,
yeah. I think that that's fantastic framing. That is, and it points out what's so wrong about that method of analysis. I think it was in May of 2022, and I saw this meme. It was it's like Homer Simpson like talking to like a little Bart Simpson or something. He's like, "Yeah, my coins are down 90%," and he's like, "Yeah, your coins are nine. No, your coins are down 90% so far."
So far, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, and it doesn't matter how much down they are from the high, right? Like what matters is a sound valuation. And even in TradFi, you see this like, oh, it's down 20% from the high. It's like, yeah, but the valuation is still XYZ above whatever's normal. So that method of analysis is, yeah, super bearish on it. People do it all the time, professional investors all the time, but it's not the right way to think about these things, especially in a low liquidity environment, right? Because the price could go insane from relatively small volume. When you start seeing these things trade down that much, like I think, like you can argue about the usefulness of DCFs and things like that. I think that they start to matter in those like capitulation moments. So like probably for something like TIA, like the DCF is like very relevant, um, and probably doesn't like look too good right now.
I mean, it's still at 5 bill FTV. That's the thing, and at $30,000 cumulative revenue with unlocks coming up. I agree with you though, Nikhil. Like, I think eventually there will, and I think that's what funds are looking at. Like, the people that you talk to are probably also like, oh, like it's been beaten down, but there should be a narrative. And I
Yeah,
wonder if that's going to be a thing going forward, or if it was just something in the past. Because in the past, like, things did go up because of a narrative, but it doesn't mean that necessarily will continue happening
that's
in the
true. Yeah.
future. Like, the space was a lot smaller, less assets, more hope, more optimism by people. They're like, oh, modularity, and then now it's very much like more people are more sophisticated. I think to the point that a lot of people know that it's only making X amount of money, and
The other thing I'm thinking about is categorical winners, because like Solana is like the go-to play for like high throughput chains. You can make the argument maybe Aptos Sui as like potential like next participants for a run up, but generally when people think of like, oh, like fast chain good, how do I get exposure to that, like Solana, or when people think of like okay, like app chain Thesis or something like that, people will think Cosmos. I'd like to think people would think Avalanche, but likely they're thinking Cosmos. And then if someone's thinking about like modularity, like that's what I'm just thinking about for like categorical winners. It's going to be more or less Celestia and Ethereum post ETF. Like Bitcoin is probably going to be trading a lot on like flows, so it's kind of falling into a category of its own in some ways, or like a similar category as Bitcoin, still with influence on a variety of other things. But that's just my general thoughts on it. So Celestia is interesting just because there is a lot of fragmentation in some of these other categories. Like, if you want to get exposure to like app chains, there's a lot of different platforms that might, support that to some degree. Or for high throughput chains, there's a lot of different categories. But Solana is already like the clear front runner there on that side. Celestia is kind of like the only one in that category. Maybe some might say it's a failed category. Some people might say it's a category that's yet to see success. So that's the only thing I'm thinking about, is that I think like markets are also very like simple, very mid to left curve. And so if they're like they want to look for a really easy winner in a category, and that's, I wouldn't say Celestia is a winner. It's just one of the only participants in that category that actually has made a name for itself. So that's my
that's
only
fair.
thoughts there. Like a left curve take, I would say.
Yeah, to bet on Celestia, you need a lot of Solana-sized rollups posting data to it over a very long period of time. I mean, look, we saw this in TradFi markets where things in the Nasdaq, or just think the Nasdaq itself, got bid up to extraordinary highs and didn't reach that high again for 15 years. I might be a little off on the time frame there. I think it was 2015 that it got back to its 2020 or 2021 highs. Or sorry, 2000 or 2001 highs, right? So like it could be a legitimate thing. Like if the app chain thesis is a thing and things want to post data to Celestia, it ends up being the big winner. Like it could be the fundamental winner like today through the next 15 years, but it's going to take a long time for that valuation, I think, to make a lot of sense. And we've seen it. We have an analog for it in TradFi markets. It's it's a non-zero chance, right?
Yeah.
It makes the story interesting.
Yeah, like with many apps, many chains, products in this space, like it's possible that Celestia is a winner at some point in the future, but the valuation today might have just been like very early, like Ryan is saying. If that, I don't know that we see the need for whatever the numbers that Dan Smith has run, like 60 some Solanas, rolling up all their DA onto Celestia. But if we get to a point in the future where that is like we've got that much stuff going on blockchains, and we need to have that much data availability space, um, you know that might be the kind of break even win point for them. But as of today, it's questionable if that's a possibility.
That's fair. I'm going to offer the opposite thing as well here, like what would need to happen, and this is also from Daniel Smith. Probably should have had on Daniel Smith on this pod instead of me to actually give the views. But what he said would be good for Celestia, and I think something that you also mentioned, Danny, is gaming, because gaming requires a lot of data. to be posted. So gaming L2s, gaming L1s, whatever GameFi there is would be good. Like Ryan said, Solana rollups posting on Celestia would be huge just because they also have a lot of data going through it, but it's going to take quite some time. Those two are the main things to watch out for, though, apparently. The opposite of that would be that there's unlocks coming up, and also data availability is very cheap and presumably only going to get cheaper as more alternatives launch.
Yeah.
There's a few live right now, but there's more building and more coming. So we'll see how it all works out. Narrative number 2 that have died: real yield. No one cares about real yield anymore. GMX, we had returning fees. No one's like, oh, we need real yield. 2022 bear market, everybody was looking for some GMX fork that would return ETH to ES, insert token here, holders. Not anymore. People are uninterested.
Yeah, I have a very mild take on this. I think this behavior is very similar to what we see in TradFi and equities. When markets are down, people look for like safe investments. Your sort of mom and pop, like, you're not looking for a ton of risk. And so to look for something that earns you ETH on your ETH directly, and you're not like playing this, maybe it'll grow 100x in the future and justify a crazy valuation. Like, that's not what people are looking for when all of their when all the value of all the things that they hold has just cratered 90%. They're looking to hold on to what they have left, and so to look for like safe opportunities to basically just like earn on what they have left. I think it's like sort of a very natural reaction, and I think that's kind of why we saw that real yield movement of people being like, well, I really only want to hold like ETH and stables, and so if I can earn like actual like cash flow directly on that, then I'll do it. So obviously when the market goes up, then people people switch very quickly, and they say, well, I don't care about real yield anymore. I want to capture the 100x like on the way
Yeah.
up.
Next bear market. Next bear market.
If it's not a super cycle.
It could still be a super cycle. It could be a bear market. Up only still.
Next up, we have AI.
Hmm.
No one cares about AI anymore, man. What happened? It's because they keep lobotomizing Claude and Chat GPT. We can't pump the markets anymore. What's happening with AI agents? I think was the last thing that became popular, and then those kind of also died out. But when do our resident AI expert, Ryan, when do we see that come back?
I think it's going to be with us for a long time. I think that the intersection of crypto and AI, there are very narrow use cases that make sense. But look, things go through hype cycles. It happens. It's not surprising. If you're a value-oriented guy, you can see that the hype has been built into the price of a lot of these AI things. If you are a like very sensible VC who understands the AI space, you see a lot of like froth and like nonsensical things in the agent space. So like, yeah, it's the hype has certainly died down. I think that you're going to see these decentralized compute projects are generating real revenue. They are being used. Um, IO is generating GMV. Render just posted its highest ever burn, so revenue on chain in a single epoch, this latest epoch on Solana. Akash numbers look, they're pumped, they're doing revenue. They have some interesting partnerships. So yeah, like things are going, but things don't happen overnight, like I think a lot of the crypto markets expect. So yeah, it's just gonna take some time. And is it warranted that the hype died down across AI? Like, yeah, right. There are other things going on in the world right now, like obviously the election cycle. Crypto broadly is just like back in the news. Like all eyes are kind of like on ETH, BTC, and now Sol for these ETF approvals. And the GPU shortage, it's still very much there, but it's not as intense as it once was, and you can see that in prices of HNA 100s. So yeah, look, these things are good. Narratives are going to cycle, but there's still like fundamental value that can be created. But yeah, like steer clear of the things that don't make sense. Like, is it like, do we need like a ZK proof of the AI inference to be posted on chain? Like, I don't know. I don't think so. Personally, I'm not placing my chips there. Is it time for agents right now on chain? I don't know. Like the big AI shops can't really build agents right now. So like, why are some crypto guys going to be able to do it? Um, so
Wow.
like, yeah, it's like be NFA, be careful out there, but like there are some things that make sense.
Yeah, I think the with the hype cycle, I think this always happens whenever you start seeing stuff with AI. It was very clear because they would just add AI to the end, and I think it got like the like reached the pico top for both Monad hype cycle and AI hype cycle when they launched a project called Monad AI, and that's when you were like, hey guys, like maybe let's take some risk off over here. Let's
Yeah.
relax a bit.
Yeah, I think this is one definitely where um, people have gotten a little overexcited in the short term. That said, I think if you look at like behaviors, like people are using ChatGPT, they're using Claude, they're using these LLMs on a daily basis to like answer questions where previously you might have gone to Google search. Like they are changing like base behaviors of people that are like interacting online and doing things, and same goes with like actual workflows. Developers, I mean, if you've seen any of the reports that are out there about people like reporting productivity increases from just like being able to simplify their their coding experiences, get their boilerplate up really quickly, like get a first draft of something, help review writing, like it's changing a lot of workflows and work processes, kind of just across the board, really anything you can think of these days. And I think that that's something that's like, while I think it's understood, it's like that part of what's happening is kind of going under the radar while everyone's getting excited about like doing inference, doing AI agents. It's like the actual like root behaviors of people that are changing, and businesses as well, like, basically providing these tools to their employees for the productivity gains. It's like that's like a fundamental change that I think we'll just kind of continue to see accelerating as these models get better.
Yeah. And I think the key thing is this kind of goes back to our social media discussion, which is that what can some of the products that are being created here at the intersection of crypto and AI offer that is like completely different and basically impossible to offer in like traditional Web 2? Because, like, for social media, for example, not saying that Farcaster is offering the same thing as like a Twitter Reddit hybrid, but essentially there's just a lot of overlap there, too much maybe of an overlap. And same thing we're seeing here, where there are a variety of different like on-chain models that are basically being created, like these compound open source models, especially in the BitTensor ecosystem. And they're very interesting on paper, but they're just not different enough from the alternative that is easier to access and that more people would access. So I think till we see that like we're kind of just going to be waiting here for something to go up, which is why I was pretty interested in my shell, because basically it offers some of the experience that character AI, if you guys are familiar with that. It's like a marketplace of different LLMs. It's usually used by people that want to like talk to specific custom LLMs. Like, I don't know, like there might be a Sam Bankman Fried like LLM that basically like talks from his perspective and just says like, hey, buy FTT or something like that. Obviously, don't do that. But like, so like just crazy stuff like that. But people love that stuff because it's
Yeah.
like, part of internet culture. And my shell basically is offering similar friend tech type, like I guess incentives on top of that, so that you can actually like provide some tokens to the actual creators of these models, whether it's to gain access to it, gain upside into it. And it's really in early days, but I think that those types of experiments where it's offering a product that is completely different than what can be offered in Web 2, but iterates on that functionality, is something that can be really valuable here. And I haven't seen enough of that in the decentralized AI space. My shell's one, but I was curious if anybody here has seen something that kind of offers some of that same energy, I guess, of providing something very different.
I think people are going after this. I think the problem is it's very early days for this tech, and like to have like even an example of being like an AI agent, like if you want to have something that's going to like do your like go do your shopping for you and like have packages come to your house automatically, and like it just understands like your spending habits and the things that you need. Like there's a level of like handholding and like actual traditional development that is required. Like we're not at the point where these are just like, okay, I can just like have this plug and play AI agent and it's going to like do these things I tell it to. There's a lot of like intermediate steps that like need to be tackled first. And so I think that, people are seeing those things in their head and they're like, wow, that is going to be amazing. But like, I think the tech just isn't there yet to be able to just spin those up in a day. Like there needs to be a lot more development to be done. Cause I see the same like value in gaming in the future, like NPCs and like, characters in games. Like there's a lot of traditional development work that goes into like crafting stories and like, thoughts and voice lines and all these things where, if you can get to the point where there's these like really well featured characters and you just can kind of like drop them into a world and it understands what it needs to do, like that's obviously incredibly valuable. The amount of man hours you wouldn't have to spend designing, there's so much money on the table, but it just isn't there. It just there's way too much handholding required to like get something to that kind of end state today.
Yeah, I would have just brought up gaming as something that's like very clearly intersection for AI agents, but I'm not even sure if it's necessary in crypto. We'll see. I think like crypto has some cool. I mean, in general, anywhere, any like thing that you can take risk on for you or send money for you, crypto has use case for it. So I think it's like with anything, we'll come up with some form of narrative. It might be a bit of a like A to C instead of an A to B, but it'll be fine.
As an example, I think since you mentioned it, like I think we can picture the applications, right? Like if you're someone who has loans like active in DeFi or something, like you could imagine like a well designed like AI agent that like auto manages like your LTV and things like that, right? Like puts risk on or takes risk off
Yeah,
as needed. But like I mentioned, like I think people are imagining these things and like the tech like needs a few more
yeah.
steps to be kind of fully there.
Yeah.
I was surprised that there's no AI agent for emails, for example. If we don't have an AI agent for emails or like scheduling and stuff, how can we have? Is there one? Is that why people are smiling? There's one, and it's
There's some early stuff there in beta. Yeah. But not it's obviously not crypto stuff.
yeah. But no, what I mean is like if we don't have it for email stuff, then we're not gonna get it for managing your lending and borrowing because that's a lot more trusting. Like you can send the wrong email, but I don't want like to lose money.
I maintain the view that the most interesting things in AI and crypto are not the intersection of the technology, but the market structures that arise from AI. So the compute markets, where there's a shortage of compute, um, blockchains present a interesting like distributed system solution and bootstrapping mechanism to, you know, to mobilize idle compute resources. Um, on synthetic data generation, like we're going to run out of high quality data by like 2026 or 2029, depending on who you talk to. We're going to need to improve these models over time. Like we could use decentralized GPUs to generate synthetic data at a much lower cost than you can in a data center. And like there's going to be, or there's a non-zero chance and probably a high probability that energy resources are going to be strained in certain localities because we're going to be using them to power football fields full of high performance GPUs. So we're going to need to use token incentives to bootstrap decentralized energy resources. Like those are the things to me that crypto has like some shots on goal for. I mean, you're seeing them in both liquid and VC markets. Um, on the product side, like, yeah, maybe there's going to be something there, but it's like we're all just guessing at this point. I think
Yeah.
that that's where you have like you have big markets with like tangible, meaningful shots on goal that have, in my view, like decent probabilities of success.
Yeah, I think in general though, most people are interested in not that side, like the actually logical business side, but more on the, I guess, like a bit of a sillier side because I don't know. I view that as a bigger opportunity. There's no way to say like how much a protocol that allows AI agents to be in games could generate, like how what that should have as a value, versus with a caution stuff. You're very much like okay, like line by line we can work it out, like how much it's at its fair value. Um, So I guess that's the big crypto unlock here, is that we can speculate on these, and that's the only thing that we really need on that sense. Yes. Anyone want to do the last dying narrative?
Last dying narrative.
It doesn't have to completely die. It can come back.
The L2 narrative, the scaling via the L2s and building for the maybe not building for the at-home staker, but though that is a maybe early innings of a dying narrative, giving the moves from uh, Paradigm and Max Resnick, I think his name is,
Yeah.
and Max Resnick uh, um, being a guest on podcasts like Bankless means he's being taken very seriously by some people.
Yep.
I think that that scaling via the and he's explicitly said um, that something along the lines of like Ethereum should eat L2's lunch, like
Yeah.
should compete against them again. That's very interesting. That's a very interesting turn of events. And if you want to long ETH, in my view, you kind of want to see that compound. So yeah, maybe the L scaling via L2s is a dying narrative.
I mean, yeah. I think I agree with that. That's not.
He made my point for me. I don't have to say anything.
That's literally it. I mean, I'm gonna take the counter here, and I'm just going to say maybe we're just having some bumps on the road, and as I can't really make a very good argument for this because I also hope they die, but as the UX improves, which is something that I feel like has been said every day for over the past however long, um, it'll just get better, you know?
The the biggest problem I have is that we're seeing, this would have been incredible to predict several years ago, but we're seeing the economics just not play out in ETH's favor, right? It's playing out to the favor of L2s. Like they're getting the users, they're getting the sequencer fees, and ETH is losing out. And if you're like thesis is that like ETH as money solves that somehow, like because we're using ETH on those chains, like that fixes the problem. It's like what at some point in the future when literally all activity is performed on L2s and there's this continued gradual decline of ETH versus some potentially other asset or chain out there, what is the reason that L2s wouldn't just move elsewhere? Like if there's nothing keeping them there fundamentally other than being the biggest one today, what happens when there's another biggest one in the future? Like I just don't see compelling reasons for like just moneyness to like keep you in the picture.
Yeah. Also, if Ethereum doesn't go up, nobody will use rollups. Like that's literally it. It's the price of the price of the token is very important to activity, and I think everybody knows this. And it's like I don't want to say put the pump-mentals on it, Vitalik, but you got to focus up a little bit. I mean, that's like you said, if there's no value going to the base chain,
Yeah.
why would
Exactly.
people ever roll ups? Yeah.
Also, I think that
Um,
the Max Resnick and like Paradigm team talk about increasing the performance of the base layer. I don't see that as mutually exclusive from L2s necessarily, because like one could make the argument that one of the issues with like base rollups, for example, that debatably have more alignment with the actual the Ethereum base layer gains access to some of those fees because you're using nodes as sequencers basically, and so there's a little bit more connection to the value flow. The argument that could be made is that by increasing the performance of the base layer, you make base rollups more attractive of a proposition, and then you align the activity of L2s with the L1. Because right now that's just not there. It's not attractive enough of a proposition to use base rollups right now. Block times are too high. It would just be an expensive and slower solution rather than doing what Optimism and Base are doing right now. Why do it?
yeah.
And for what benefits, basically. So that's the only thing I would think that it actually could potentially be something that's valuable for aligning the L2 narrative with the L1.
That makes sense. I I think we're good for the day. Do you guys have anything else you want to bring up very urgently, very importantly? Any tokens that you want to mention that might go up 10,000x over the next few weeks? Or no?
Let's see. Maybe USDT to $2. That's all I got.
My bank account, 10,000x. Send it, boys.
Ryan, any specific coin picks, price targets? I think we're good to go.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, guys. And thank you to our listener for making this all possible. I think that's it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.